Hello, everybody. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to McDuff Lives, and it's a special presentation of Harley and me today on a Thursday, well, due to travel plans for the next couple of weeks by Harley. So, heading into the holidays, let's get Harley's thoughts about what we all should be thinking about. Peace, hopefully. What else? Stick around. We'll get started in just a moment. And welcome once again. I'm John O'Loughlin. My guest today, this Thursday, is Harley Schlanger of the LaRouche and the Schiller organizations. Hi, Harley.
Hi, John. Good to see you.
Thanks for taking time. I know you are very, very busy, both at the Schiller and LaRouche work, but also getting ready for the holidays because you've got some young ones.
Well, actually, this afternoon I had a lot of time. I didn't know what to do with myself.
This afternoon being the past four or
Morning for
five
you.
hours,
Yeah,
morning
yeah.
for us on the East Coast, because Harley, of course, is over in Potsdam, Germany. And I'm watching the videos of the farmers protesting in Brussels, this in France as well. That they're not having any effect on the policy, and it troubles me. Uh, Europe is just turning into a really hot mess. I invite you to start there.
Well, it's interesting. When I got here in 2016, I already was aware that there were some severe problems in Europe that go back a long way, but they were masked by the fact that the economy functioned fairly well. So at that time, you had the usual complaints: wages, working hours, conditions, and so on. But people generally were fairly comfortable if they were employed. But that started shifting, especially after the Maidan coup in Kiev in 2014. So I got here shortly after that, and you could immediately see the effects of that in terms of the immigration. In Germany, there were immigrants from Iran, from Afghanistan, from Iraq, then a lot from Syria and Turkey. And then after 2018, 2019, we started getting immigrants from Ukraine. And this was having an impact on the country overall because the economy was not expanding. And Germany had a relatively high standard of living as a result of the export policies. But what happens when you have countries that were buying from you that no longer are customers? Because they can get the same product almost as good from somewhere closer and cheaper. And so we began to see a decline in German industry. All of a sudden, people were getting disgruntled. We had the elections that brought in the Olaf Scholz government, which was a disaster. And then even worse was the Merz government. And so Germany's been on a very downward course. And then, of course, similarly with France, Macron has won the last 4 or 5 elections, but he can't get a majority. And so he's forced to run a minority government, and he keeps picking figures as prime minister who are less popular than he is. And so you have people in the streets almost all the time in France. Now, Great Britain, it's absurd that you went from the Tories, who were a disaster, the last one, Sunak, and then after that you have Starmer come in. And Starmer is an absolute buffoon. I mean, he may have this image as being very slick and above it all, but he has no idea what he's doing. And when I say that, he knows what he's doing, but it won't work. And so you have the Europeans stuck with an old policy format, which is the minority coalition governments, and they're trying to run the economy based on exports when the exports are falling. They're trying to make profits because of cheap electricity, but they no longer have cheap electricity. And they have a constant flow of immigrants, in some cases from Africa, in other cases from Asia, South Asia. But it's a mess. And so what do? They thumb their nose at Donald Trump. Now, they know that Trump is not very pleased with Europe to start with, for some good reasons and for some not so good reasons. As in the case of everything Trump does, there are some good reasons and bad reasons. But what the problem is now that the Europeans have decided they're going to rebel against the United States. And what that means is they're going to conduct a war against Russia, even if the United States will not. And that's where you see the extent of the delusion, that if you have military leaders in the three main countries, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, who are being tasked with the idea of winning a war against the world's strongest nuclear power, Russia, and they rely on World War II strategies, you can see that if Putin really ever does get into a war with them, they'll be evaporated within a few hours. And the British people know that, the French know that, the Germans know that, and yet they're sticking their nose in the air and saying, if you, the United States, won't take on Russia, we will. And they don't even ask the question, what is Russia doing that they have to combat? So it's a classic case of an enigma in a puzzle in a riddle, and they don't have the slightest clue how to deal with it.
NATO. It seems to me that all of this is driven. I think one way to look at it is that this is all NATO policy playing out to weaken and take down Russia.
Well, that's the goal of NATO. Question is, do the European governments have any idea of what that would mean? And the answer is they do, and they're fearful. The line they have, and this is what you see all the time. You hear it from von der Leyen, you hear it from all the Eastern European, the Baltic countries, and so on, that Putin won't be satisfied with Ukraine. He's going to keep going, keep going. And what they don't answer is the question of, if he were actually going to do that, why would he have held back from just flattening Ukraine in the first place? And this is where you see the ego and arrogance of NATO. They think that their weapons, their training, their forces caused Putin to go slow. Putin went slow because he was hoping that at some point there would be a diplomatic settlement. And he was hoping also that the Europeans would recognize that they couldn't win the war and wouldn't spend themselves into desperation. And what are they doing? They're running their economies way below break even. And their hope is that they'll be able to get enough money to get through this winter to keep Ukraine on its feet. They've got a leader, Zelensky, who is extremely weak, but delusional. He sees himself as the great military hero who saved Ukraine. And they have no idea that Putin has been really restrained in his dealings with them. So they think it's sort of like the guy who's standing in front of a crowd, and behind him is a whole line of tanks. And the guy who's standing there at the front of the line thinks he's stopping the other side's army. But that's not what's stopping Russia, not the threat of German Leopard tanks or the French drones or the British, the two British main destroyer groups which can't get out of port. What's holding Putin back is he doesn't want World War III. And he's assuming sooner or later there will be rational leaders in the Western countries, or partners, as he calls them, he can talk to. So far, there hasn't been. So then you throw Trump into the middle of this. And what did Trump just do? The new national strategy document, NSS 2025, makes a couple of very interesting and dramatic changes. It starts by saying that we are no longer going to take care of the world, meaning the United States. Secondly, that the situation in Ukraine is going to be in Europe's theater, and the United States is going to move out of that. And then the third point is that we have to take care of things in our own hemisphere. Now, this is where you see the problem with Trump. Trump actually is acting as though he has to save the West from the Chinese and whoever else. And therefore, he keeps blustering about going in and knocking out Maduro. Well, if the United States does go into a full war with Venezuela, it won't be the slam dunk they think, but more importantly, it will more isolate the United States than we already are. And so instead of approaching this from the standpoint of what is the benefit of all, he's flexing his muscles, and he's using the dummy Hegseth and the Marco Rubio, aka Narco Rubio, as the frontmen on this. So we're in a really big mess strategically, which could be turned around with some deft statecraft to turn it into a win-win situation. And hopefully that's what's going to come out of the next couple of weeks. Pause, assuming that there's not a war started on Christmas.
By the way, happy Hanukkah and happy holidays to everyone. It's definitely the holidays have just rushed right into my life. I was not ready at all. Boom, here we are. So let's all kind of take a breath and maybe just gather some.
They hit me that way too, John. All of a sudden, my kids were saying, "Where's our Advent calendar? When is the Hanukkah man coming to light the candles?" So, we have both celebrations and not the time or the money to deal with them.
Oh boy. Well, yeah, that's interesting though, and I'm sure that's very common with mixed religions in one family. It's nothing, it happens all over the place. That's beautiful. A lot of my friends, my colleagues on the internet, Herboye Morich of Geopolitics
Oh, sure.
Empire, and we were talking yesterday, a very interesting show, but I asked him, what was his big story of the year, and he said, well, it's the algorithm ghetto, which I think what he means by that technological means are now impending so close on us that we're at the boiling frog's point, where if we don't jump out of the boiling water, we're going to die.
Right.
So I tend to agree when I see what's happening in Europe with regard to free speech. And Herboye explained about how Mexico is just starting to have digital ID for everybody and unavoidable. If you want to open the door to your complex, you need to have a digital ID now. And this is possibly the biggest threat to freedom in the world that the world has ever faced.
Well, let's just take a look at two cases. One is George Galloway, who I assume you are familiar with him.
Sure.
He's in a kind of exile right now because of the way he was treated the last time he and his wife tried to enter the United Kingdom. And here he is, as he points out, multiple times elected as a member of Parliament, very prominent figure in the Labour Party, prominent figure in British politics. And he was treated so roughly, he had a minor heart problem while he was trying to enter the country. And he's still very vocal about it, but he's obviously hurt and weakened by it. Then the Swiss retired military colonel, intelligence figure Jacques Beau, probably one of the more serious and thoughtful of the people who you see speaking on various television programs about Ukraine, he was just put under sanctions. He can't use his credit cards. He said he couldn't use his digital key to open his garage door. You know, they've essentially made him a non-person in his own country. And this kind of treatment of people, and what was his crime? They say that he's using Russian intelligence briefings and pushing forward Russian arguments. He said he never reads the Russian press. He's using the New York Times and the London Observer and the Daily Telegraph. So he's being sanctioned for reading the British mainstream neocon newspapers.
That's in Switzerland, is it?
Yeah, he's Swiss.
I'm just wondering which government was doing it. Yeah.
Well, no, it's the European Union that's doing it.
Okay, so they can just zap you wherever you are if you're in.
Sure. If you have a bank account,
Yeah.
they have access by the international banking laws that they can go in and seize your account or freeze it.
Wow. Maybe I don't want a European passport after all. You know, I mean, really, it'd be nice to be able to just travel around Europe with an Irish passport or something, but no, not if they're going to seize my bank account because I say something that they don't like.
They can get it without your passport, John. I mean, the banking laws were changed so dramatically between 2001 and this year that have to do with, I mean, what they haven't changed is they haven't regulated the policies governing the hedge funds and the venture capitalists and others. They can do whatever they want, including issue financial instruments with nothing behind them. But if you're a normal person who's got to pay bills and you use credit cards, you use various other kinds of means of paying, you could be left with nothing. They can cut you off from your account, cut you off from your credit card. And that's what's happened. I had a chance to talk with Alina Lipp, who is a relatively young German journalist who was covering the Ukraine war before it was a war from Donbass. And her whole family was essentially had their money seized in Germany, and the whole family is now in exile. They had no recourse. And Merz is saying that they're going to make sure that there's not a fifth column interfering in German policy. So here you have the people who invented the idea of Russiagate are now running operations against the people who have been victimized by Russiagate. It's a topsy-turvy world.
Yeah, and you know, the whole idea of like the American Revolution and our founding fathers and our forefathers and you know, winning all the wars and you know, fighting for freedom. You know, the general population, whether in Europe or in the United States, is not going to lift a finger to stop this digital domain that's is descending upon us, whether it's from satellites by Musk or digital IDs from the government or central bank digital currencies that will just be able to do exactly what you said to anybody on the planet. How can we raise attention and sound the alarm in some way?
Well, people unfortunately have this view that money is transportable. And what they have failed to remember is the lesson of history. Why did the Jews who were run out of one country after another keep their wealth in diamonds and things that were easily transportable? Because if you had a bank account, you ended up losing it. You had nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're seeing is the ability to control the life through the central banks. And both in terms of how governments function, how institutions function, and how individual people live. And most people are terrified by it. And that's why they're not speaking out. They worry that they're going to get in trouble. I mean, look, it's clear to me that there's a certain fragility to your existence if you go against the blob. The blob has many ways to get you, as Schumer told Donald Trump.
6
They
ways
can
from
get you.
Sunday.
Yeah. So you can either live in fear and underground, or you can go out publicly and fight it. And if you're going to fight it, you better have a strategy. And the strategy has to include who are your allies, who can you ally with, and how do you know who you can trust. And on that, I mean, we do a lot of work on exposing who are the ones who use these operations to silence people. How do they do it? What are the networks they use? Because a lot of this is still undercover. A lot of it is not carried out directly. So you're getting hit by something you can't see. So you'd better know what the other side is doing so you can at least have a hunch of when something's coming after you.
When you say the other side, most people think that that means the other side of politics, the enemy on the right or the enemy on the left, the evil Trump fascists or the evil Biden oligarchs. Nobody sees above that level to the fact that we're under attack by this blob that it's like I was talking with Roya yesterday about the midterms in 2026, not far away. People, are starting to throw their hats in the ring and get financing and get ready and all. But Trump seems to be throwing all kinds of meat out there for the left wing to pounce on in order to retake the House. And it's a very, very close thing. My comment was, and is to you, that there is this uniparty that controls the Congress like a pendulum from the middle, and sometimes it swings to the left and sometimes it swings to the right. But it's swinging to the right to accomplish getting Trump's agenda including J.D. Vance, which includes technocracy. And now they're done with Trump. Trump's got JD in the spot, and they're going to start, retiring the Trump brand, if not the Trump person. Your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, look, Trump has had more than 9 lives politically.
Yeah.
And what he has going for him is the distrust, if not hatred, of the establishment that the average people have. You've got the country's somewhat divided. You've maybe a third of the population doesn't trust anybody who's an oligarch, who's a banker, who's an Ivy Leaguer. You have it's no longer just identifiable personalities or ethnicities, but where someone's from, how they speak, what they do. So you have a very divided population, and you have a certain grouping in that are the neoconservative war hawks who think if we had a strong enough military, we could dominate the planet, and that's what we have to do. Then you have people who tend to agree with Trump that we've got to stop the wars, but who's he fighting against? He doesn't make it clear. I mean, my complaint with President Trump from the first day he was in office in 2017 is he never fully identified who his enemy was and why. He rant against liberals, against zero growthers. I mean, he had a lot of fat people, skinny people, ugly people. He had a lot of people he didn't like. But right in front of him was this designated grouping of arrogant aristocrats who are not that large a number, not even 1% of the population. And they probably carry about, in terms of fictional wealth, about more than 50, 60% of the actual wealth in the society. But instead of going after that, he sort of diffuses the fire. And as a result, the MAGA people started getting confused. Who's the real enemy? And you see this now uh, within the MAGA movement, for example. I was listening to a debate today between Marjorie Taylor Greene and I can't remember who it was, one of the normal Bush neocons. And MTG was attacking the technocracy, uh, central bankers, the oligarchy, and the other one was attacking the big government. Now, big government is on the side of the corporate cartels. And the fact that you have a few businesses that are not part of that doesn't mean that there's not a corporate cartel that's steering the policy. So it's the lack of precision and, more importantly, the lack of principle that you see. And this is where, look, I wish Trump would escalate the drive to end the Ukraine war, because the longer it lasts, the more people are going to die, and the more danger there is that it will break out of containment. Now, how could he do that? He could read the Riot Act to people like Starmer, Macron, and Merz. I don't think he's done that. Supposedly, he finally read the Riot Act to Netanyahu a couple of days ago. That's not going to have much of an effect. He's got to go in with an American policy which says, we're ending this war because this war is being fought on behalf of 1% of the world's population, who are billionaires or millionaires and who are controlling flows of credit and currency. You've got to stop it. And one of the ways to do it is to go back to regulated banking so that the bankers won't be able to manipulate the system, so that if they run into trouble, they'll get bailed out. So a few simple things: no more bailouts, truth in terms of who's doing what. And that's not so difficult to do. The fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene, who may not be the brightest person around, but is actually finding her footing and making a lot of good points right now, is very important. So define the threat to the country. The threat is not Chinese communism. It's not Putin. It's not left liberals. Most left liberals can't organize anything. The threat is the global oligarchy that's over and above the nation states. And this was something called synarchy. We've talked about this a little bit. That's the old French term. How the establishment exists above the institutions and controls the institutions from the outside. And if something gets in the way, they have assassins they can deploy. They have financial warfare they can deploy, like sanctions. When you put a sanction on someone like Jacques Beau, what you're hoping is that Jacques Beau, in order to stay out of trouble, will be quiet, because he's a very simple, straightforward, clear spokesman. What happens if people like that don't shut up? What happens if they continue to intervene and speak? Well, then you've got a fight. And Trump is pretty good at picking fights, but he's not always so clear on what he wants to do. And that's where the direction, I think, has to come, as we in the LaRouche movement ran the fight for quite a while on against the Russiagate. We know what the other side wants to do. And by other side, we mean the oligarchs connected to the City of London, to Wall Street, and to the European Union. That's the threat. That's the enemy that's trying to get a global system. Now, the other side, and this is what also Americans don't realize, the Chinese are actually on our side right now. Something very interesting from the last couple of days. There's all this talk about how we're going to use Bitcoin and Ethereum and all these various digital currencies to deal with the debt problem. They're not dealing with the debt problem. They're just building a bigger debt. They're injecting creating a fake currency that's not a currency to try and roll over the debts and smooth things out. The Chinese just said they're through with that. They're not going to tolerate that anymore. What happens if China doesn't allow the Japanese or or hedge funds to use digital currencies to meet their obligations. Well, then there's going to be a problem. And we could have a meltdown of the whole system. Now, in some ways, John, that would be the best thing because you'd be getting rid of a lot of the crap. And the people who own the crap and think that because they own the crap, they can dictate the rules, they're going to find themselves on the ledge. But I don't think Trump intends to do that. I think he's trying to figure out how to make money from it. And that's where the principled message never gets out.
Yeah, I don't see much principle in what he says. At least there's nothing diplomatic about what he says, and he talks more like a mob boss than a president of the United States, in my humble opinion. Nevertheless, he has tremendous support, as you said. I was shocked on my social media. I posted yesterday. I kind of got gaslit by Tucker Carlson, who said, Trump's going to declare war against Venezuela tonight. So I said, oh, well, okay, I'm putting that on my social media. I said, well, Trump is going to declare war by presidential decree tonight. And
don't invite any Venezuelans to your Christmas party.
I know. And so I woke up this morning and no, he didn't do any such a thing.
You heard last night that Tucker Carlson was saying that Trump was going to declare war.
Yeah. And so I passed it on. One of the responses that I got, actually a couple of responses I got, was that yeah, we want to have that war. We want Trump to take down Maduro, take down Venezuela, because we've been victims of the China-Venezuela attack on the United States for too long.
Yeah.
And these are serious people that are saying, China and Venezuela have been attacking the United States for a long time. And, I think what they're talking about is fentanyl and the drugs affecting us, which is, if somebody could, I don't care what we have to do to stop fentanyl from coming in or being created in this country, I'd be for it. But shooting the drug boats isn't doing anything. It's got to go where you talk about, and that is into the capitalization of the big drug mafia, the worldwide one. And so it's a confusing time. I was kind of caught off guard. I thought, wait, what are you talking about? China, Venezuela, war against the United States? That's just not been in my head, but it's in a lot of people's heads, Harley.
Well, to an extent, this is an extension of the anti-Cuban policy. But Cuba has not been active against the United States for a number of years. And the Cubans are doing all they can to improve their own healthcare system, their education system. They're making some progress. Where's the revolution coming from? The drug trafficking is affecting everyone. It's not just being done against certain people. And, I think it's kind of interesting if you look at what happened in Hollywood this last week with Rob Reiner and his son and killing himself and killing Rob Reiner and the mother.
Yeah.
It affects the whole society. And this is where you see the problem of misidentifying the enemy. Let me just say something about drugs, because as you know, over my shoulder, we have the Dope Incorporated book with the Union Jack and a syringe on it. Yep. You have one there too?
I got one right up here somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this caused so much controversy that had LaRouche been assassinated in the 80s or 90s, it would have been over this issue, the production of this book. Exactly. And there were teams sent out to kill him. In 1986, October 6th, 1986, 400 armed military, police, sheriff's department attacked his farm in Loudoun County with the intention of killing him. And, we hear about 40 police going to Roger Stone's house and, these other kinds of attacks where they use super force to try and show the point that they're out to get you. We had 400 crawling all over LaRouche's estate, and LaRouche was saved because they got to the Justice Department and said to tell Reagan that if LaRouche is killed, the blood is on their hands. And the decision was made to bring him in the old-fashioned way, John, where you work out an agreement where he comes in and turns himself in. But what was the issue with LaRouche? He was identifying, as we were talking about, I think, last week, the international drug flows and money flows as an additional factor to the military defense establishment.
Mm-hmm.
And the huge amount of money, but also the damage it does. And the damage it does to families, to children, to adults, in destroying the cognitive and creative capability of a whole section of the population. Now, if you're serious about cleaning up drugs, you have to ask yourself, where's all this money going? Who's getting the money? What are they doing with it? And we had case studies of Iran-Contra in the mid-'80s. We had stories of the Medellin cartel and so on, how these guys were being deployed. The old Sicilian mafia in Italy, how they were being mixing the funds of the drug trafficking with NATO funds to set up assassination and hit teams. So there's all this evidence out there about it. And then it's connected with an overall operation, which starts with the idea that you can destroy the minds of enough of the youth and weaken the ability to think. And then you add to that the cybernetics and the whole social media culture. And you have kids who, I'm sure you've seen this. It's just shocking to me. You walk down the street in any European city, and there are large numbers of kids walking like this with their phones in front of their faces, banging into people. They're completely oblivious that there's a world outside of that little machine they have in their hand. And that's why they can get away with this stuff.
Bernie Sanders published a short video of himself this week in which he says we need a moratorium on AI. The AI is clearly the most powerful transformation of information that we've ever had, and it's huge. And these data centers are they're building faster and faster and faster. And this, again, we're approaching that ledge where once we're over it, we're not going to get back. And that is if we do not slow down and take a look at this as a nation, as a world, and say, should we not have some regulation of this AI before it starts to be just the tentacles will be everywhere and we won't be able to escape. I think Bernie Sanders is right about that. We need to have some rational government thought about what are we doing with these computers. And one of the things that Bernie mentioned was that what if in the future people just stop talking to each other, that we stop doing anything together at all? Kids are starting to be raised just like you said, in which they don't need to have a social life. And more importantly, they get their affirmation. They get from some avatar that's made out of AI that's teaching them morality, ethics, values, which is insane to me. But this is all part of this global takedown of freedom that we're living through right now. May I also say that the term the beast man, which I think comes from Lyndon LaRouche, if not from some of you guys in your writings in EIR, uh, appears to be applicable here in that if I could say after World War II, a lot of the leaders that won the war were just not going to let there be another war because they were going to take over the whole darn thing and make sure that there was not another war. And that's why they wanted the Manhattan Project. That's why they wanted to have this beast man power to say, do what I say or else I will squash you. And in order to get there, they've built these things like the CIA and everything else that works with these NGOs and the corporate and the oligarchs and all of these people. They're all enlisted in this big beast man takeover of the world. That it's like H.G. Wells' Open Conspiracy,
Yeah.
and bringing all of this stuff together. I have to say that the perspective that you guys have given me about the British Empire and where all this stuff comes from, it's got to be widely known that this is the justification for hooking kids on drugs. This is the justification for assassinations. This is the justification for regime change operations and for us militarizing the entire world. This is the justification so that the beast man can win.
It all goes back to the British Empire as a Malthusian institution. After Parson Malthus, who argued that population grows geometrically and food supply arithmetically, and you're always going to have too many people for too little food. And therefore, this is the Hobbesian view of a struggle of each against all to have enough. And of course, if you say something different than that, if you argue that there should be enough produced that we can distribute it enough to keep everyone alive, you're accused of socialism. And they've invented whole pejorative phrases that are drilled into people in various institutions. On the one side, you have the Heritage Foundation, the neoliberal economic school, the Austrian school, which says no government, any interference of government is unnatural. Now, the other side, you have people who say use the government to even everything out, the Klaus Schwab approach, which is not meant as a serious strategy. It's basically meant as a cover story. The problem is economics is difficult when you're dealing with huge sums of money and you're trying to figure out how it all works. It's not difficult if you break it down into what it really is. Are we producing enough to sustain the existing level of population at an improving lifestyle? LaRouche broke it down into two basic concepts. One is the potential relative population density. How many people can be sustained per unit of land in any country? And if you want to improve the circumstances for people, what's the necessary input to allow for an improvement? And where does that input have to go? And that's what he talked about as relative or energy density, that the increase in the power of your energy sources gives you the free energy to produce a surplus. So it makes every employed worker more productive, producing more productive value. So how do you put that together? Well, that's the job of statecraft. How do you make sure there will be enough workers, enough access to money for research and development, numbers of people who are becoming scientists who are making new discoveries and turning those discoveries into new technologies? And that's where the question of productivity comes from. So physical economy, and I've simplified it quite a bit here. This is usually about a 3 or 4 hour class, but physical economy is something that people can understand. Do you have young people who are learning how to run aspects of an economy? And how does that tend to work in the real society? Well, anyone who's ever worked in a factory knows that a well-run factory has a means by which an individual on an assembly line or in a production unit has access to the bosses and can point out where they've figured out levels of efficiency, other than speed up or longer hours. The efficiency comes from technology, from the machine tool principle. That's what made the United States a powerful economy, not just because of the individual trying to get rich, but the idea that you have to produce a surplus. And the surplus has to be enough to cover the input for the next productive cycle. If you don't do that, you end up with debt. And now we've had the last 50 years, we've had the boom and bust cycle based on debt, bailouts, writing off people, not writing off capital, but writing off people. So when we talk about Malthusianism, the drug economy is part of the Malthusianism. Do we really need young people who are creative? Well, if you're going to kill them off, if they're useless eaters, if they take up too much of the society's surplus, we don't need them. And this was not only some kind of primitive society, this was the theory of the Nazis. This was Hjalmar Schacht, Hitler's finance minister who developed the concentration camps. This was Goering. This was Montague Norman of the Bank of England. They were dedicated Malthusians. And who was the leading Malthusian in the last 50 years? Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth's husband. And he passed it on to King Charles. I don't really know how deep Queen Elizabeth was into this, but her whole family was part of that. And that's why the person formerly known as Prince Andrew isn't a big surprise. What does he have? What does he think about the value of life? He doesn't care. He's caring about keeping his position in the oligarchy to suppress any potential to disrupt it. So, if you put that together, and as I said, this is sort of just off the top of my head, sort of compressing it, but that's what physical economy is about. It's not about how much money can you launder into a bank account somewhere that no one knows. It's not about creating digits that represent money in the future and that are attached to your name. It's about physical intervention into nature and recognizing that from nature, we can intervene to create new levels of added value in a productive process. That's physical economy. That's what we have to focus on. And anything else is going to end up as a swindle, trying to give someone a competitive advantage. And usually the ones who get the competitive advantage are the ones who already have it.
Exactly. Well, Mr. Beast seems to be winning so far, but another part of it is dumbing down of humanity and just not teaching us the art of reasonable thinking, the idea of really using the tools that we've gotten from thousands of years of philosophy and practical experience to teach people how to solve problems for themselves. They're all going to have to go to AI to solve their problems anymore. That's just so frightening to me that I don't know how to do it except for to just say I'm going to keep fighting against this.
Well, we were having an interesting discussion last week's Manhattan Project. My associate Karel from Paris, who's an artist and a very accomplished art historian, was talking about this question of why art is so important and why music is so important. And John, you know this, harmony, the ability to communicate ideas that may be coming in out of different areas, a soprano intersecting a bass line and producing something new. the ability to have people speaking about different things, but in such a way that the net effect is to improve the cognitive ability of everyone around them. This is the great work of a small number of people, from Handel and Haydn through Bach especially. And I hope people get a chance to see the Christmas oratorio this year, because Bach's Christmas oratorio is just phenomenal. But it elevates you. It elevates the spirit. And that's what religion should be, to give you a sense of the capacity we have as human beings to communicate profound ideas that take us away from the bestial side of our being. And that's left out of the schools now. It's an elective, if you want to sing. It used to be, I don't know, when you were younger, wasn't music and singing a part of education?
Yeah, you had a choice between instrumental music or vocal music.
Yeah.
And everybody was, interested in it. I mean, I loved it. I started trumpet in the fourth grade, and haven't stopped learning music ever since. And yeah, everything you said about harmony and intertwining of different voices, and all of the frequencies that you get. I mean, people are now very hip to the idea of healing frequencies. Listen to, well, you and I talked about the resetting the A to 432 hertz, so that
And you see it 256.
and so that it fits with the normal harmonic progress or harmonic series, and jives with the ultimate beat of the earth that people have discerned, that you can actually measure the beat of the earth at around 7 or 8 hertz. So
And when LaRouche intervened with great opera singers, for example, we had I can't remember the names right now, but when we meet again at the beginning of the year, we can discuss it. We had a series of events where we had people sing at the Verdi tuning, which is what 432, A at 432,
yeah.
and how that saved the voice. Whereas when in Vienna, when they raised it higher and higher and higher, people blew out their voices by their early 40s. Capuchile is one of the people. I'm sure you're familiar with him. So LaRouche intervened and got all these opera singers to sign a statement saying we should go back to the scientific tuning. He was called a fascist for that, because the idea that it should be arbitrary, and that's just people who are jealous that they can't sing higher or lower.
Well, it's really true, as somebody that's done some, professional opera singing from time to time, never, full time, but I've sung. And I did an entire production of Magic Flute at 432. And we had like 20 performances or so, and it was fabulous. And it was a much more comfortable place to sing than 440. The 440 is good for violins, and so it became, the symphonic directors wanted to have it higher and higher, just because it cuts through louder with a violin. But
Yeah.
but I love that Lyndon LaRouche saw that and promoted it, and probably filtered from his mind down into the director up in Baltimore that decided to make that change and do it at 432. So more power to the 432.
And you risk being called an authoritarian lunatic when you say something like that. But we need more of those kinds of lunatics who can go back to the beginning traditions of real education. And that's what the fight. I think this next year, John, our biggest battle is going to be to transform education to fit real economics and real human civilization.
All right, Harley, more power to you. And thank you so much for joining me all year, and the special show here on a Thursday. I won't see you till next year. So happy holidays. And I look forward to a successful and hopefully a peaceful new year.
That would be a beautiful gift to humanity.
All right. Thanks again. Bye bye, everybody.